Howdy, Jacob here. Today we're looking at a company that I'm sure no one's ever heard of before, Visa. Just kidding. 571 billion market cap, 573 billion enterprise value, financial services. I mean, you know what they do. Great growth here, great return on invested capital, operating margin increase, gross margin actually down a little bit, but I mean, what type of company has 67% operating margins? Like that's just unheard of. That's just insane. I mean, we all know about the company. I don't know how much more I have to go through, but 20 billion cash like products on hand, 20.4 billion long-term debt. No concern with that balance sheet. Cash flow, reinvesting back in themselves quite a bit actually, almost double the capital expenditures from 10 years ago. Making a good amount of acquisitions, probably using 10% of their free cash flow to make acquisitions, 10% reinvestment, using about 50 to 60% to buy back shares, and then maybe 20% or so on dividends. I don't know how that added up, but hopefully it added up close to 100. But really, just huge amount of repurchase of shares. Hopefully, they're buying back at cheap prices. Again, I've said on other videos, if you buy back shares for a great business and you kind of dollar cost average, you're just going to get the growth of the business, which can be very substantial for a lot of businesses. I mean, obviously, if you look at the history of a Google and Apple and Amazon, if they were to buy back shares at those prices just along the way, you would have gotten the fantastic uh, CAGR that the business really had. But really, you have to think that it's also using your part of your cash to be buying back shares. So if they're buying back shares at expensive prices that are going to get you 5 to 7%, you'd rather just get that in a dividend, or more importantly, you'd rather this company reinvest at possibly 20% rates of return that they've done historically. I think they're big enough, and I don't know if they quite have all the reinvestment capabilities. I don't want to compare them to an Apple because I think Apple has way less reinvestment opportunities since they make 100 billion a year. But I don't think there's much room to reinvest here. So I think that them buying back shares and paying a dividend with a majority of their cash flow kind of makes sense to me. Let's go through making some assumptions here. Revenue growth. I just don't know how they don't stop growing. It's just crazy to me. Like I know they get whatever a tenth of a penny or a hundredth of a penny or whatever on each transaction, and they have like trillions of dollars in transactions, but it's just crazy to me that they've still been able to sustain double digit growth really over the last 10 years consistently. I mean, talk about a consistent business. Them and MasterCard have got to just be like, I mean, obviously, when there's a downturn in the market, yeah, of course, but like 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, people are spending way more than they were the prior year. It's just crazy. But let's say 8% PE, price free cash flow. I mean, Moat, anybody? 22, pretty high for the growth rate I think that they're going to have ahead of them. But I mean, they're a Visa. I think that it's Visa, MasterCard, and then you look at premium cards, you got Amex. I guess you could maybe say Capital One, maybe I don't even know other cards, but uh, they're top dog. I mean, you go to Costco, you can only use a Visa. They're they got a moat. There's no denying that. Margins, I love their free cash flow is way higher. That is just beautiful to me. Let's do 58. Oh, not that. 58, 62. Let's say they buy back. What are we saying? Let's say 570 billion, 5.7 would be 1%. That would be 10.4 billion in aggregate for 2%. They can afford that. Since that's about 60% of the free cash flow. Dividend currently paying out 3.8 billion, which is like I said, I think 20% or so. They can definitely increase that as well. Let's increase that slightly higher than their revenue growth, and then we're leaving still, what is that, 15 to 30% of free cash flow to reinvest back into themselves, make acquisitions that make sense, and then The company right now would have to fall 38% before you get the return that we're looking for. I mean, 38% sounds like a lot. Let's see, where have they been? They dropped to 177.6 September 1st, so you're darn near close. I mean, their financials probably would have got 10% lower or 5% lower due to the fact their revenue has jumped in the last year. But um, it's not unreasonable to think that it might fall that much. But yeah, I think those really mega cap companies are difficult to get at a great premium um, due to the fact that everyone's watching them. I mean, you can get some like I don't know. I personally think Google in the 80s was 15% over, at least 15% over a 7-10 year period. Facebook, Meta under 100, I think, is an easy 15 plus percent return over a 7 to 10 year period. But it really doesn't happen often. So to be able to get that would be just awesome. And then, I mean, that's just the return I'm looking for. So if you do your own analysis, you just care about getting a 10% return. Maybe don't care about the maximization of return. You just want a very solid investment. I think this is one of the best companies out there, and you're going to they're really going to give money back to their shareholders. But again, you want them to be buying back shares at a cheap price, which can maximize its return, and that's not exactly what we're seeing here. But again, if you dollar cost average, that can make the investment just fine as well. So hopefully you enjoy the video and have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.